You do not make eye contact. You do not stare. Because the moment you do, something shifts behind those yellow eyes, something that was never put there by any engineer, never programmed by any scientist, never planned by anyone in the research department. The older toys had a name for it. They called it the depth, and every toy who had seen the depth up close had one thing in common. They never spoke again. Not one word, not one sound. Just silence, and that same hollow expression frozen on their faces like a mask they could never take off. Mommy Longlegs had warned Bunzo on his very first day. She had stretched one long pink finger toward the lobby and whispered with a voice that carried no warmth. Look at the walls. Look at the floor. Look at anything in this entire factory. But never ever look at him. Bunzo had nodded. He had listened. For 6 years he had kept that rule perfectly, until the night the lights went out and he heard something breathing directly behind him in the dark. The factory had a heartbeat, not a metaphor, a literal rhythmic pulse that ran through the floors, the walls, the ceilings, deep into the metal bones of Playtime Co. itself. The maintenance toys had reported it first, back in 1987, 3 years after Huggy Wuggy was installed in the lobby. A low vibration, almost too deep to hear, that began every night at exactly 2:17 a.m. and stopped at exactly 2:19 a.m. Never longer, never shorter. Always those 2 minutes. Engineers investigated twice. Both times they found nothing, no mechanical source, no electrical explanation, no structural reason for the vibration. The second engineer who investigated filed his report, packed his equipment, and then sat in his car in the parking lot for 45 minutes without starting the engine. His supervisor knocked on the window eventually. The engineer turned to look at him, and the supervisor would later tell his wife that the man's face looked like someone had reached inside him and removed something important. The engineer never returned to the factory. He requested a transfer the next morning and refused to explain why in writing. But the vibration continued, every night, 2:17 to 2:19. And if you pressed your ear against the factory floor during those 2 minutes, the older toys said you could hear something beneath the pulse, something that sounded almost like a name being repeated over and over in a frequency too low for human ears. They never agreed on whose name it was, but they all agreed it was not a happy sound. Mommy Longlegs remembered the exact moment she realized Huggy Wuggy was not what they had been told. It was a Tuesday. She remembered because Tuesdays were inventory days, and she had been moving through the game station corridors counting shelf stock when she passed the eastern stairwell and stopped. Huggy was standing at the bottom of the stairs. This was not unusual. Huggy moved through the factory sometimes, slow and deliberate, a presence that made every other toy instinctively find somewhere else to be. What was unusual was what he was doing. He was standing completely still, facing the wall, and he was talking, not the recorded phrases that played from his chest speaker. This was different. This was quiet, personal. A low murmur that Mommy Longlegs could not make out from the top of the stairs. She leaned forward slightly, straining to hear, and then Huggy stopped talking. Without turning around, without any movement that she could logically explain, he simply stopped. The silence that followed was so complete, so total, that Mommy Longlegs felt it press against her like a physical weight. Then, very slowly, one of Huggy's enormous hands rose and pointed upward, directly at her. She did not move for 11 minutes. When she finally walked away, she realized her legs had been shaking the entire time, and she had not even noticed. Catnap was the only one who was not afraid. This was not because he was brave. Catnap had simply made a decision very early in his existence that fear was a waste of energy that could be better spent on observation. And so he observed. He watched Huggy the way a scientist watches a storm, with distance, with attention, with no illusion that he could control what he was seeing. What Catnap had observed over many years was this: Huggy Wuggy did not sleep. Every other toy had periods of stillness that functioned like rest, a dimming of awareness, a slowing of internal processes. Huggy had none. At every hour, in every corner of the factory, in every moment of darkness and silence, Huggy was completely, fully, perfectly awake. His eyes never dimmed. His attention never wandered. He was always processing, always aware, always watching something that none of the other toys could see. Catnap had also observed that Huggy never ate from the facility's maintenance supply. Every toy required periodic energy intake to maintain their systems. Huggy had not touched the supply station in 3 years, and yet he was not deteriorating. If anything, Catnap noted quietly in the private log he kept behind a loose panel in Playcare, Huggy seemed to be getting stronger. The readings were subtle but consistent. His movements were slightly faster than they had been 18 months ago. His grip strength, based on indirect observation, had increased. Something was feeding him, something inside the factory itself. And Catnap was becoming increasingly certain that whatever it was also aware of being watched. The night it finally happened, Dog Day was the only one awake. He had not chosen to be awake. Sleep had simply refused to come, the way it sometimes did when the factory felt too quiet, too still, too much like a held breath. He was sitting near the Playcare entrance, back against the wall, when he heard the sound. It came from the lobby. A single footstep, then nothing, then another, slow, deliberate, like something that had all the time in the world and knew it. Dog Day did not move. He understood in the deep animal part of his construction that no engineer had intended to put there, that moving right now would be the wrong choice. The footsteps continued, growing closer, moving through corridors Dog Day could not see, but could map perfectly in his mind. East Hall, then the junction, then the long corridor that led directly to where he was sitting. And then they stopped. The silence stretched. 10 seconds, 20, a full minute. Dog Day kept his eyes forward, fixed on the wall across from him, following the one rule that every toy in the factory knew without being told. He did not look. He would not look. Whatever was standing at the end of that corridor right now, in the dark, with those yellow eyes and that painted smile, he would not give it the satisfaction of eye contact. He sat perfectly still and stared at the wall and breathed as quietly as he possibly could. And then, from somewhere very close behind him, he heard a sound he had never heard Huggy Wuggy make before. It was soft, almost gentle. It took Dog Day several seconds to understand what it was. Huggy Wuggy was laughing. And somehow, that was the most terrifying thing that had ever happened inside Playtime Co.